Hey, I had an interview on a podcast and it's called On the Air with Florenza, and we became fast friends. I really like Florenza. She asked me a personal question if I do or do not drink coffee. And what surprised me is at first she tells me what she thinks. And she said, I don't think that you do drink coffee because it's something that would come into the model. Kind of, she was pointing perhaps at addiction or at desire or want and those positions on how we might relate to something. But that to her surprise, my answer was I find coffee as a comfort and I do drink coffee. And it made me think about something that is really important that I want to talk about right here is the control that I'm talking about in my forthcoming book, which this podcast on the air with Florenza and my book come out on the same day on September 16th. The book is called No, K-N-O-W, where the status quo ends and you come to life. But back to what I was saying is when we're talking about control, where Florenza was talking about self-control and perhaps bridging into something we could think of as addiction, as I said earlier, that what I'm talking about is the control that we assert to maintain or advance our place in the hierarchy. So let's bring it full circle. If I were drinking coffee so that I could feel better than other people, I'd be in the model. But I'm not drinking coffee for that reason. It's a choice. And I tune in intuitively. Do I want a cup today or don't I? I have this type of relationship with it. But I think that that's important when we're thinking about this idea of what I term the model, or what I just defined, the control we assert to maintain or advance our place in the hierarchy. That's a different thing. It has to do with social constructs, and it does have to do with us. But the thing that it really has to do with is we were told as young ones, and not necessarily malevolently or maliciously, to be somebody else, right? We were told, I know better for you as the parent than you know for yourself. If you had older siblings, which I had many, they told you quite often, perhaps, we can have a little club behind the scenes, that they know better for you. And that's logical in this world where we believe they have more experience, they've been living longer. But what we didn't entertain are two things. One is children come to teach us. What? Children come to mirror and teach us. And the other piece of it is when we respect and understand the relationship that the individual understands themselves the best, when we nurture that and free it and allow it to be what it is in truth, that person experiences natural consequences that shape their future, that move them into better positioning and better circumstances for who they are. And as soon as we get in the way of that, which I see for most parents, and again, it is a societal thing. It's not that I'm saying, well, you're doing this. No, there's no blame or shame in it. It's that it's time to change it. We start saying to a child who's cranky at 1.5 or 3, oh, you're just tired. We start to label it. And these small pieces build to where the child comes home with a test and the parent is frustrated or has something else on their mind. And then instead of saying to the child, let's talk about this later, the parent says, why aren't you as smart as your cousin or whatever it is? And that is not a working model. It is a model in which we are trying to be a model citizen, a model parent, a model, all these things, when in truth, that's not how we reach something that is better for us and better for society by being in a system or being in a model. We need to free ourselves from that. And when we operate off of what we know, and you've met people who know, you may have experienced knowing. In this case, we're going to start from square one, which is not the gut or instinct, or we're not going into intuition right here. We're going to simple humanity, the humanness of knowing when you're hungry, the humanness of knowing when you don't feel well, this simplicity. But you've met people, and this is the experience you've had too, I'm sure, at least once in your life, where you knew what was going on there and you didn't need to engage or say anything, but everybody in that room knew that you knew, right? You were calm, you were with yourself, You are all these things we try and attain through meditation and yoga. And yet here we are keeping up a life of trying to have others know better for us, but we don't know that that's what's going on. But we're trying to control things, and we're trying to keep things in control, and we're trying to, others are controlling us. That is the system in which we live. It's the model. And when we break it down, we are striving constantly to maintain or advance our place in that hierarchy. Okay, I've said it 3 times. I'm sure you have that now. But my work also takes repetition to clinch. It's like learning a new language. It took me decades to not only figure this out, but to repeat it so that I could remove myself from the model in different ways in my life. And I'm going to be honest, I'm still doing it in the fourth way. In my life, I'm removing myself from the model, and it's awful, but I figure I can do it. I've done it 3 other times successfully. And the result of it was when my children were young, I spent 8 years really learning how to parent in a different way. And what came is people would call me a magic parent, people who didn't even know me, people whose children were doing something naughty, and I'd say one thing and their child would just calm down and stop. Right. And it's no magic. It was hard won, but I moved out of the model and I saw that child very differently as a result. But the child could feel it. The child knew I knew. I wasn't trying to assert anything in the way of judgment on the child. And that's the power of this, is everybody can tell when we know. And you got to get my book to learn how that all works out. Okay, September 16th. All right, thanks. And like, share, follow, do all the things. Tell your friends to grab a copy because this is going to change things. And we got to get into that, right? The world, it's clear. We all know things need to change and it's time. So let's start here.